whilst I find myself within the parameters and confines of the seeming human experience wherein I have the use of one of these bodies, it's unwise to attempt to use a concept such as the idea that there is no world or that all of this is just an illusion to try and escape the effects of my thinking that are constantly attempting to assert themselves as truth in this place. And whilst truth is however you see it, there is a singular truth from which the creative source of all reality emanates, which we call God or universal source. And the portal and the connection point and the whole thing, it's a little tricky to talk about it, but it's within the mind. And meditation is one of the ways to push yourself in a mental sense right up against the veil of consciousness, wherein, and Jesus talks about it as knock and the door shall be opened, wherein we wait for that door to be opened and to experience then something beyond the level of consciousness which we seem to be circumscribed by in the human experience. One of the things that happens in spiritual work, and I'll call it work, although it's not really work, it's more of an adventure, in spiritual work is you become so relieved to finally find a teaching such as A Course in Miracles or something that has a completely liberated anchor point from the world. It doesn't depend on a religious aspect or any kind of icon of religiosity for its authenticity or for its credibility or anything like that. Any true spiritual teaching is the same. It comes from the Spirit, and being one with the Spirit is easily connected with through keeping an open mind and being willing to become more and more honest as you go along, as far as searching out one's own denial of truth goes, and in this case truth being the eternal nature of life, not truth as I seem to find it on earth, although relative truth here being something that obviously, if I'm attempting to establish it or if I'm seemingly verifying it, it's only because I've already given it a meaning. And therefore I must plumb the depths of that meaning to see where I have given it, or how deep that meaning goes, as an idea of the belief that I think I'm separate from God or separate from the whole. As above, so below. In this world, I'm not separate from the whole, even though it's an illusory dream world, a practice world, if you like, a classroom, if you like. I'm not separate from anyone or anything here, just as I'm not separate from anything in the eternal realm. And the two realms, the above and the below, are also not separate, quite simply because God is everything. Now, if you're imagining God as a conscious being or a higher deity style thing, you're going to have a problem, because God knows not of the world. God is simply source. God is simply that which is. And until you experience it directly for yourself, until you come face to face with God and realize that the Father and the Son are one in that regard, and the above and the below are one, you're going to be constantly attempting to reconcile what you cannot not see as differences between the two things in your own mind. One being eternal truth being real, and the relative truth of the seeming experience of oneness we find ourselves with on earth as being false because it's an illusion. Right? But it can't possibly be. If God is all things, then God is also. The will of God must be able to be known on earth as it is in heaven, as simply the practice of the acceptance of all things exactly as they are. If I think there's someone trying to trick me into something, or someone trying to lead me out of out of my ideas of what I think truth are here on earth, then I still have healing to do in my own mind, because if there is only the will of God, it can only then be that there is still more for me to learn, or still more for me to include in, rather than to try and transcend through concepts, to include in as my own responsibility. And Jesus puts it beautifully in A Course in Miracles when he says the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept atonement for himself. So in every circumstance, I'm simply accepting that I'm not separate from everyone and everything, whatever is being said and expressed, within my capacity to comprehend it and understand it as it's being said and expressed. And if I don't understand it, or if I'm trying to convince myself that maybe it doesn't mean what I think it means, then I'm in denial of what it is that's being presented to me as part of my experience, and still trying to separate myself out from it. And the mind deliberately does that with malice and forethought. And I have to be extremely vigilant, because that's the price of peace. I have to be extremely vigilant for that, as I process through the particulars of the relationships that show up for me in my world, to look at as an idea of, is this a lesson or is this a blessing? Is this love or is this a call for love? And that's where honesty comes in, and I'm the only one that can be honest about how I feel about things and how I perceive things. And as I perceive it, so shall it be, and so shall it unfold and present the effects of that perception to me, which is either going to be a blessing or the ongoing or repetitive representation of the lesson, perhaps in another form or shape or whatever, later on down the track. I love that Sigmund Freud said that repressed emotions never go away. They just come back as an uglier version of themselves later on down the track. And that's exactly what happens. It's like a toddler that you ignore. It's just going to keep screaming, and that screaming is going to get louder and louder and louder, and the suffering that you endure because of it is going to get worse and worse and worse. But luckily there is a limit to suffering, to what each of us can take as individual entities, identities, conscious associations within the framework of the dream. And that's where I accept myself. In the Course in Miracles, or in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says it's a misuse of denial to try and ignore or deny the experience you're having in the world whilst you're having it. Because if you're experiencing anything, then it's the power of your own mind. To try and deny the power of your own mind is a misuse of denial. Deny the denial, but don't deny you're in denial. So there is a big difference between transformation, which is a living action of forgiveness, and transcendence, which is more a Buddhist-oriented mental positioning of raising oneself above the dross and the chaos of the world, primarily through the adherence to a concept wherein perhaps I've learned that the world is not real. It's just a dream. It's just an illusion. Therefore, I'll just blot it out. And when it shows up trying to push my buttons and whatever, I'll ignore it and tell myself it doesn't exist. I don't have to worry about that. Good luck, unless it's a runaway bulldozer. So transformation, however, instead of transcendence, transformation, which is what is taught through A Course in Miracles, takes total responsibility for how I feel about anything. I'm responsible for what I see, I'm for the experiences it brings me and the feelings and everything. Total responsibility, because total responsibility is the only way to achieve total liberation, total ownership of one's position in the world as the dreamer of the dream. If there's still something I'm attempting to defend myself, or still I'm perceiving someone who's attempting to do other than bring me my greater good, then I still need a miracle. My learning is not complete. And it may be that I have to step back And I love the 12-step practice. So 12 steps and, 12 traditions and 12 steps. Or no, it's 12 traditions, 12, whatever it is anyway. But at the end of the day, a recovering alcoholic is advised to perhaps sit for 5 or 10 minutes and just mentally review the day gone by and see if there's any triggers that pop up or any kind of thing that sits there uncomfortably, and to be willing to look at it differently, right? To be willing to take on board that perhaps the way I'm seeing this isn't correct, that perhaps this is showing up for me for a reason. Because I guarantee you that nothing shows up by accident, by coincidence, that doesn't actually bring you greater good, because there is only the will of God. It's easy to defend yourself with the concepts that are given to you for your own liberation. It's very easy to do that. Oh, good, there is no world. Thank you. Nah, don't want to know about it. Nah, get away from me. It's funny. You're attempting to draw me back into the dream, back into the illusion. It's like, yes, of course I am. The way out is through. Total responsibility. Total responsibility. Own the illusion. Be in the world, but be not of the world. That voice in the head, the voice that says what things are and how things should be. Don't listen to that voice. Even the voice that tells you spiritually how things should be and how things are. There is no how or why or what. There is only the will of God. And I'm either in the acceptance of it or in the denial of it. And it's really that simple. And it's kind of like I have to make this message somewhat complex in order to sort of parry around with you and parry around with my own reflections here, attempting to convince me that perhaps there is a someone or a something else that doesn't have my own best interests at heart. And I love that I can simply recognize in any given moment that I don't really perceive my own best interests. I have no idea what they are. I've got this book of A Course in Miracles, or I've got the Bhagavad Gita, or I've got the Holy Bible, or I've got the Quran, or I've got whatever it is that I've got. And I'm attempting to integrate the principles of it into my consciousness so that I can utilize the application of those principles for the release of my mind from the temporal association that binds me to the wheel of life and birth and death. So I can move onward in the journey of my soul. And so I include everything in. I include everything in. I accept that I find myself as this body, seemingly with a bodily identity called Dave. Not a very spiritual name, but maybe it is, I don't know. But including it all in, including in how I feel about it, how it is to me, and accepting it for a moment as my reality, whilst I find myself with the use of it. Yes, I am mind, higher mind, Christ mind, integrating the principles of a transformative process through the cellular reinterpretation of defense mechanisms that formerly kept me in denial of the truth of myself, which is that I am one with all things, as above, so below, whole and equal, and part of the divine will of God as the expression of the creative reality of Source, God. There's nothing to defend against, there's nothing to doubt, there's nothing to be concerned about, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is really quite simply very beautiful. If I get caught up in other disciplines, if I get caught up in ancient teachings and all of that sort of stuff, then I've fallen back into the conceptual association of arbitration between concepts as a way of navigating my experience through the world. But if I let go of all of that, I am. If I let go of everything, God is. I have to let go of my religious beliefs, my spiritual beliefs, and simply accept where I find my feet on the earth, in this body, seemingly in this body, even though I have a very credible spiritual teaching and an experience, the enlightenment or the illumination of my mind, which tells me that I'm not here now and this is not even happening. It's one thing to know that, it's another thing to live it. It's another thing to have it as your living experience, not just once in a while, but as your 24/7 understanding of yourself as being whole and perfect, as being sinless, regardless of the seeming persistence of the illusion of the bodily form association that I'm using to participate in this outpouring or expression of the universal curriculum, or the message that the universal curriculum contains. This world is not my home. I'm not from here, and neither are you. Yet the only way out is through, and unless I include everyone and everything in as my own ideas about it and about myself, I cannot transform the cellular mutation that keeps me bound to the dark plane and begin and experience the holy instants, the holy moments of transition, the holy moments of inner shift, the holy moments of change that bring illumination, because it's accumulative, those holy instants accumulate, brings illumination closer and closer as I collapse the time between the alpha and the omega of my own association to the here and the now, simply by being still. I love you. Keep going, and always be willing to keep the mind open. What was learned yesterday is already gone. Today is a whole new lesson. Now is a whole new lesson. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about ancient spiritual teachings, transcendental practices, Vipassana, and all those other things that good spiritual associations like to involve themselves in, believing that, and I'm finger on my nose here, believing that somehow it might help to pad out or make a greater pathway of understanding for the experience that I'm attempting to have through some other spiritual discipline, such as A Course in Miracles. It's not going to do that. I remember my dear friend Richard, who started me on this journey, Richard the Garbo from Long Island, by giving me a copy of the Good News Bible many years ago. And one of the things he said to me was, just stick with this. He gave me the Bible, and in it, of course, was the Sermon on the Mount. And eventually I got around to reading that. I read the book of Jeremiah at first, but he said, just stick with this. He said, whether you join a religious order or not doesn't matter. He said, but just stick with this. He said, there's no point getting on one bus that's going to the destination that you want to get to and then getting off at the next stop and getting on another bus that's going to the next destination, because they all speak a slightly different language. And before you know it, I might get on the wrong bus. The bus driver knows where he's going. I don't know if I did a good job of representing that, Richard, but if you're still in the realm, I love you and I'm very grateful. Peace.